As we've been covering, 4 of the biggest tech CEOs are set to testify on Capitol Hill tomorrow. Epic Games CEO Tim Sweeney, meantime, is calling out Google and Apple for being absolute monopolies. Epic Games, of course, is the maker of the hit game Fortnite. I spoke to Tim Sweeney earlier today.
The market is Google and Apple. Those are your 2 choices for mobile platforms. Apple says if you don't like our platform, use Google, and Google says the converse. But the problem is these companies are using their control of the operating systems powering the devices to exercise a monopoly over all commerce that is conducted between consumers and businesses that happen to use their devices. Apple says, if you build an app for our platform, first of all, you can only distribute it through their store. They don't allow competing stores. Like, imagine a town that only allowed Target and disallowed any other stores from building, building venues. I mean, that's totally un-American and uncompetitive. But that's exactly what Apple does in an absolute sense. Apple's rule is simply prohibited. Whereas Google has created a semi-open platform with Android. The core of it, the software, is an open platform, but then they layer on all of these business terms with the Google Play Store and with Google Search, which force everybody to, force all of the carriers making devices to lock it down and limit it. But the effect of that is that Apple and Google are taking 30% of all revenue through commerce. They're deciding what kinds of apps you're allowed to build and which ones you're not. And they're preventing entire categories of innovation in technology. Microsoft is building this amazing xCloud service so you can stream any game over internet servers to any device, and you can have a high-end Xbox powering experience in playing it on your smartphone. And Apple says no. Apple says you cannot have that idea on our device. And that's got to stop. What we really need is competition among stores, among payment services, so that developers and consumers can choose each component of the software stack they want to use and not be forced to use only Apple's.
Apple also says 84% of the apps on the App Store are free. And I've talked to plenty of developers who are grateful for the services that Apple provides. Don't you think you should pay some form of rent, if you will, to access those services?
Yeah, competition is the way that prices are set in a fair market, right? For example, Apple provides bandwidth to all of these free apps and to paid apps so that you can download them to your device. And who else provides bandwidth? Akamai is the #1 provider of CDN bandwidth in the country, probably world, and Amazon is a competitor in the space. And there are market rates associated with paying for bandwidth. There are market rates associated with payment processing. PayPal charges 2.5%. MasterCard and Visa charge 2.5% to 3.5% for payment processing. And the problem with the 30% that Apple and Google charge is it's completely disconnected from any actual costs of their business. And Epic, we know this. We run a store. We run the Epic Games Store. Epic has processed over $1 billion worth of direct transactions between players and our company on Windows, on Mac, and on Android. And we know the cost of operating the store. The cost of operating a store is 5 to 7% of revenue for Epic. And Apple and Google have way, way higher economies of scale. And you can break down the cost by component. And it has nothing to do with these rents that Apple and Google are charging. And so, and Epic is always happy to pay providers for a fair service that they provide. And we like to choose between providers, right? We'd like to choose between Apple's payment service and PayPal and MasterCard and Visa and make them compete to offer the best rates or the best quality of service. And Apple and Google are entirely denying that in the way they've locked their platform down.
So you use the word monopoly.
Yeah, it's a duopoly. There are 2 companies together. They control 100% of the smartphone market, or something like 99.9%. And if you look in a lot of territories, Apple has the majority of revenue in many of these countries. Other countries, Google has majority of revenue, but it's impossible to look at a territory and say that in this place, Apple or Google is not a monopoly. They have monopoly, and they have business practices that only a monopoly could get away with. You cannot explain what they're doing in any terms other than compulsion.
Now, you launched the Epic Games Store for Windows and Mac, and you charge a 12% fee. Why do you think 12% is fair?
Well, we looked at the costs of operating the service, and they're really transparent, right? Payment processing, 2.5 to 3.5% in major developed economies, as much as 6 to 8% in developing economies. Bandwidth is 1 to 1.5%. Customer service, 1 to 1.5%. And so we're able to operate our store, charge 12%, and make a 5 to 7% profit margin for ourselves. And so it's not altruistic, right? This is a great business, and we love having the opportunity to earn a 5% profit from games made by other people by offering them our store.